Greetings, fellow armchair Imagineers! Tiki here.
And Blue Dragon 5.
And Jacob Wild, too.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we find ourselves in the cusp of Disney's big venture into the world of streaming, even courting a war in the process, we thought it'd be nice to stay up to date on the ever-growing catalog and rule on what's a must or a bust on Disney Plus. And tonight we're talking about A Day in Animal Kingdom, the highly anticipated Animal Kingdom documentary. Woo-hoo! No, seriously, I respect that show too much to even, have that as a joke. Tonight, of course, we're talking Mando.
Mando!
The Mando.
Lando.
The Landalorian.
I want the Mandalorian and Lando Calrissian spinoff, where literally the whole show is just them greeting each other, just Mando, Lando.
No, you have Carl Weathers making the introductions between the two. You have Grief Karga introducing the two. That's what you do.
Oh God.
The Landalorian.
We use some of that de-aging tech on Billy D, and we assume we introduce him.
All right. Okay, so guys, let's go roundtable. Kind of two things here. Number one, your thoughts on the first season and expectations going into this season, and then obviously your thoughts on Chapter 9. So I will go first. I got to admit, Mandalorian, absolutely a quality show. Easily the better of the two things in 2019 that Jon Favreau was involved in. I'll just put it that way. But I think Mandalorian absolutely hit all the marks it wanted to. It felt like a giant kind of sandbox of the action figures that you didn't necessarily want to play with as a kid, but you were kind of saddled with. And I know I'm not explaining that word for word, but I love the premise of the show in that regard, the action figure analogy. And the season was pretty formulaic in the first half, but not in a bad way. We got the standalone, almost Samurai Jack-esque adventures with Mando. And then as the season wrapped up, we kind of sowed the seeds for some cool stuff going forward. Obviously, Grief Karga being a big kind of lead into the next season. You can never go wrong with Giancarlo Esposito.
You mean Moff Gideon?
Well, I mean the actor who plays him, but yes.
I mean Carl Weathers is Grief Karga.
Oh my God, yes, Jesus, did I say Grief Karga? Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, I meant Moff Gideon. Yes, man, that's embarrassing. I'm sorry. Anyways, so here we are in Chapter 9. Chapter 9, I really dug this episode. It's one of my favorites. It's up there with the Jawa episode, and ironically, I like this episode for much the same reasons as I like the Jawa episode. It takes kind of an iconic race of Tatooine savages, and it kind of humanizes them. Frankly, I thought the Sand People stuff in this episode was just absolutely incredible. I loved every moment of it. Now, here's the one thing that I have is kind of a caveat / reservation for the episode. Overall, I thought it was a fantastic episode, greatly structured, all the Wild West motifs really, really in play. I feel like this episode of Mando in particular is the one that feels the most like a Western. That being said, my one reservation about this episode is I feel like, it is yet another episodic kind of Mando rolls into town, helps out a stranger who's seemingly against him at the start, but they kind of bond over their adventure. This is my only complaint about the episode because, like I said, overall, I do think this is one of the strongest episodes of the show, period. But I do think that it does kind of tread a little bit of familiar territory with season 1. Now, what I'm hoping for is that familiar territory that we're treading is kind of going to be all right, this is the
Jumping off.
Yeah, the jumping off point. We're in Mando. This is a familiar story to kind of get us back into it. Obviously, we've got a huge cliffhanger we need to talk about that kind of bursts the speculation doors wide open. So yeah, other than just kind of like treading some familiar territory in regards to like the lone gunslinger coming into the town to help out, Seven Samurai style, like the plot really does kind of feel like a mix of the Tatooine episode from season 1 and the first Cara Dune episode from season 1. But like I said, obviously, like this show has a vibe to it. This show knows what it is, and this episode pulls off that vibe better than most. And I do think that it is kind of setting up some stronger season wide arcs going forward into the story. All right, who wants to go next? While I grab some water.
Jacob.
Yeah, sure, why not? Season 1 after season 1, like basically wowed us with pretty much like, especially like the select few episodes near the end. Like it left us like obviously wanting more. Like the first season was like was very quality television, and going forward, hoping it would continue that same level of quality, if not get a bit higher. Definitely, this is more like I would say this episode is like the continuing side, not necessarily getting better, but continuing. It's like basically getting into the groove, like reintroducing us after a long break. So I think it was like a good palate cleanser and a good, to whet your appetite kind of thing. I mean, it definitely didn't disappoint. I mean, heck, it was like, I won't say. I mean, heck, the freaking end battle is almost like it's like Star Wars meets Godzilla and Tremors at the same time. I mean, it's like Godzilla meets Tremors meets Star Wars.
Oh, you're right. It's a perfect. I didn't think of the Tremors part of it, but that's perfect. Yeah.
Technically, if you have the jetpacks, we finally got to see Mando using a jetpack in this episode.
Yeah.
It also throws a bit of like an Iron Man into the mix too.
Wouldn't be Favreau. Maybe like a little dash of Iron Man just here.
Favreau.
I mean, speaking of which, if we're gonna talk about like the Marshal himself, it kind of that one scene where he's like attacking him from a distance kind of looked like it was from like a scene from Iron Man, from the first Iron Man movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, but overall, man, I guess I wouldn't say like this is like making it better, making the show overall better in any way. But it's definitely far from a disappointment. And as I said, it probably is like one of the stronger episodes, especially if you take like the middle of season 1 into account. This is a definite must.
This feels like an episode that has the structure of the middle of season 1, but with the momentum and tension of the end of season 1, if that makes sense.
Yep.
All right.
And as you point out, like it satisfies like what we all need, and then even like shows us like, oh crap, what's going on?
Oh
it's
yeah.
Like, your turn.
Thank God Timothy Oliphant doesn't have the armor anymore, man. He'd be a goner.
Pretty much, yeah.
All right. For me, I mean, of course, season 1 of Mando, I love it, man. I love it so much. It was great. It was just like it's kind of like the revitalization. I'm not going to be one of those guys like jumping down the new Star Wars' throat, but let's be honest, Mandalorian, it's a revitalization of Star Wars we need.
Well, it's nice to see something Star Wars related that's very obviously planned out from the jump.
It's just it's good storytelling. I mean, the shorthand I use for Mandalorian is kind of it's Star Wars meets Samurai Jack, which is so odd, given Gendy Tartakovsky did a little bit of Star Wars himself. It's all relative. It's all fitting, and we get all the Star Wars animated stuff tied in here in a sense.
I mean, considering that both of those were heavily inspired by Japanese cinema, it makes sense.
Absolutely,
true. Yeah,
exactly. So, point being, huge fan of Mando season 1. Can't get enough of it. And I agree for the most part with kind of the whole momentum, kind of like combination, because it's basically what if we took another stab with the middle stuff, but we added the momentum of the latter.
Yeah.
Latter parts. Once again, not that Mando wasn't. Again, episode 2 from the start always like dazzled everyone. I think episode 1 is a fantastic.
I think episode 2 might still, even after this one, be my favorite. Just because of how Samurai Jack it is. I love how in that episode it really is just Mando versus the elements.
Exactly. And again, I could use like the Daredevil analogy if it's Cutman. It's Cutman. Nothing against, again, Daredevil and Mandalorian, both very excellent, solid pilots, but let's be honest. Once you're in, episode 2 dazzles. It's like you're
Right,
hooked. You can't wiggle off the hook of that one.
right.
But that's the thing. So the point being, season 1 go off in the love fest. It all just turned out wonderfully. And of course, as it's gone on, we've learned about the making of season 1. We're all equally. How can you get any more hyped with a show? You learn how it was made. Oh my
man,
goodness!
I don't want anyone sleeping on that making of series, man. That making of series really was illuminating.
Disney Gallery Mandalorian was phenomenal. They got to do another one for this season, I'd imagine. So I mean, but we have that to look forward to at the end of this batch of Mando. But yeah, anyway, on to season 2. So this episode, it's just so good to be back. To quote Iron Man 2, it's good to be back. It's great. We're in the Old West, even more so than we were before. We revisit some stuff. We went bigger than I thought we would on our first episode, and I'm so delighted by it. It's a lot of fun. Again, we're teeing things up, and we're going big for season 2. And boy, oh boy, am I still impressed. I'm still feeling the Mando love.
All right. Okay, we got Donovan here. I think he was here when I first put this video together, but he said this episode sets the stage for the season. Absolutely, it does. No question about it. Then I don't know what to make of Claude's comment. He's just like, imagine Disney Plus doing The Mandalorian, the animated series, aka Better Lion King 2019. So basically, Claude, what you're saying is
they did have Clone Wars, which is pretty close in a way.
Yeah, I think it was like a separate comment with what you were hinting at with Lion King. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that was it. Or he's
I'm just picturing like it being basically the same show, except every time we see a human face, it's like one of those like weird uncanny valley like Final Fantasy, the spirits within human faces.
Right.
Anyways, all right. So yeah, let's just go ahead and break it all down. So of course we start with a set piece that we saw teased up a lot in the trailers. And I got to admit, I was very happy that this set piece comes right away because this really is the main scene from the trailers that they kept using. So it's nice that the thing that we're most familiar with from the trailers is the thing that we're getting out of the way with, right away.
Yep, steps out of the shadows, walking down the way and meeting that John. Apparently, not John Favreau, but different John Leguizamo as Gore.
He is so unrecognizable, man.
I know, but
I mean, I haven't seen him in a lot, but considering his most recognizable role to me is Sid from Ice Age, it was a definite departure. It was like, yes, my name is Sid too. Hello, Mando.
Yeah, I've seen Leguizamo pop up in a few things occasionally. Not really.
He'll always be Luigi in my heart.
Mario.
Mario.
Okay,
Luigi,
anyway.
Mario.
Okay, point being, Leguizamo, he was great in this kind of this gambling den, this kind of fixer, presumably, of this fighting den.
The opening was also a good reminder of how ruthless the Mando can be.
Sure.
Absolutely, great action sequence. I mean, I love how the helmet's used it within the combat, and I love how the helmet is just really big in this whole episode. But also, like, we're kind of using the action sequence. It comes back big with kind of the whole when we go to Mos Pello of it all. But yeah, I mean, Beskar as kind of this valuable commodity, and we're kind of continuing and really kind of putting the forefront up front this season. It's sort of this idea of kind of a cultural appropriation of the Beskar, where people are trying to claim the Beskar as their own. The whole, like, it's such a valuable thing, especially with how scarce the Mandos are. Yeah, really good stuff there. And of course, one of the great moments, Mando gives his word. And I love this is the thing. It's less the fact like anyone like an action set piece says, oh, okay, well, clearly this guy's a goner. But it's less that. It's more that you absolutely believe Mando is giving his word here. Hey, because he's all honorifics. It's what he's all about. No harm will come to you by my hand.
Dragon, as soon as he said by my hand, I knew he was going to pull some sort of loophole.
Exactly, but I love that just with the honorifics of it, it's like, yeah, he's not. That's why he believes him.
Like, Mando, get me down. Like, that wasn't in the deal.
He shoots the light out.
Those creatures who thrive in the darkness, that is some scary Star Wars creatures right there, man.
And again, done practically, which is fantastic.
And of course, it was all over the trailers, but we have to talk about Baby Yoda pulling the shield up, like, to avoid the fight.
I love the pram so much. I mean, the pram and the bone broth soup are my favorite Baby Yoda things. Whenever I see it, I'm getting excited. Like, oh boy, the little pram, and he can shut it.
And
That's so cool.
I might just be mistaken, but it seems like they've actually improved their puppetry techniques for this season so far.
Didn't even think it was possible what they did.
I mean, like,
Okay, so then go ahead, Jacob. Sorry.
I mean, my point is like in the last season. In the last season, like you remember, he was like being held by someone else, and like you could pretty much tell it's a puppet. But here
Right,
it's like,
right.
but here it's like he's actually moving around and doing more when he's actually being held by someone. So it actually does make him look a bit more life. I mean, not that was a problem to begin with,
Sure.
but it actually does make him look a bit more lifelike here.
We're learning as we go, even better.
All right, so that leads us to Tatooine. Now, guys, I want to get your opinion here. What did you think when you found out that we were going back to Tatooine so quickly? Did it raise any alarm bells for either of you?
It got me excited, man. It got me
Really?
excited that oh my god, we're doing we're kind of doing our whole Boba Fett thing this early. That's awesome.
Right. To me, my one reservation, of course, is the fact that the Tatooine episode was like definitively my least favorite episode of last season. So, in a way, I almost feel like this episode kind of acts as a remake of that episode in some ways.
Yeah, and in a way, and that episode didn't bother me at all last season, but in that regard, though, you're absolutely right. It's kind of a better remake of that episode in a sense, sure.
We certainly have a better side character for Mando to play off of, which we'll get to.
Sure, but also it kind of helps that we have history with it, so we don't have to retread. We can just do new stuff with it, but have the adventure in our back pocket. Like, remember episode 5 from last season? It's in our back pocket there. It's all good, but we're gonna pull from that. Like, hey, this is old Pele, man. We love Pele and old.
Okay, really.
Mando.
So when do we get? There's this one specific shot of Baby Yoda that I pulled that I'm like using in other places because it's so fucking adorable. I forget if it's before or after we land on Tatooine, but it's just I need to fucking highlight it because if not, I'm just gonna explode from the cute of it all. The one shot where Mando and Baby Yoda are on the speeder bike going through the desert, and Baby Yoda's just got the shit-eating grin on his face. Oh my god, that shot is just like, yeah, we're back, bitches, and Baby Yoda is gonna be cuter than ever, and you're gonna like it.
But they really they didn't disappoint with him in the episode. Like when he's like peeking in through the door when he hid in the pot.
The spittoon, yeah.
Okay, but by the same token, I was very worried. One of my biggest fears for this season was that they were going to turn it into the Baby Yoda meme hour. Because we all know that Baby Yoda was the big pop culture thing to come out of this series. And I feel like they used Baby Yoda perfectly this time around. He was great. He was memorable. He had big laughs and big cute moments.
And he was also perfectly there to highlight the motivations of Mando.
Exactly. I was going to say, by the same token, he doesn't like overshadow the story at any point. He's just there as a motivation for the plot. It's great.
Sure.
He's basically a lovable plot device.
Pretty much. I mean, really, when you break it down.
True. I mean, again, like we just found the right balance with him. Where again, like it's like we even kind of acknowledge it. Where people have heard about the Baby Yoda tale of season 1, they kind of named Cobb Vanth. They kind of name drops like, oh yeah, I heard about you and that little fella. It's like, yeah, everyone loves Baby Yoda. We don't have to.
We'll get into Cobb, man. But let's get into Amy Sedaris really quick. Of course, I really wasn't a fan of her when we saw her in season 1, and I think with season 2, maybe it's just I've warmed up to her. I still think it's a little weird that it's a comedian essentially doing the shtick that they usually do, just in a Star Wars setting. I think that's a little off-putting. I think that's a little weird. Like, because I think Mandalorian, with John Leguizamo being a great example, they've done a fantastic job for the most part of having these these cameos really shine in roles that are kind of like outside of their comfort zone. But with Amy Sedaris, it's like, yeah, just throw a wig on her and do your sarcastic bit and call it a day. But I mean, that being said, it's a fun bit and it's a fun dynamic, and I think what makes it here is the fact that we're already familiar with these two, so we can kind of just jump right into it.
Yes, the backstory component, just like, yeah, these two have history, which we've seen, even if you jumped into this fresh, which you probably shouldn't given it season 2, but it's just say you did. If you did, it's like, hey, these guys got history. It's like this person, Amanda's got a little relationship with, and so does, Pelly with, with Baby Yoda, and she loves the heck out of. Basically, Amy Sedaris is the audience, and it's like, who doesn't love this little Baby Yoda character, Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, so we learned from Amy Sedaris about Mos Pello, which essentially the idea is that after Return of the Jedi, after the second Death Star, that is, after that went down, the bandits took over kind of this. Really, I love the idea of. I just love the world building of Tatooine because I always think of Tatooine mainly in the context of two things. One, and Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen, that section of things, but also more importantly, Mos Eisley.
Uh-huh.
It's always what we think of with the with Tatooine. I know also you got the point being we've seen a very specific part of Tatooine.
There's also the huts.
Well, that's what you're right about that. Okay,
that's
fine.
true.
Well,
that's true.
My point is there's territory that we've seen exclusively with Tatooine, but we haven't been, doesn't mean we've been to the whole planet. This is kind of the acknowledgement of like, yeah, there's other parts of Tatooine, like Mos Pello.
And this pretty much covered how the Sand people survive in this, which is an enlightening look.
Yeah. So Mos Pello is kind of this old western town of Tatooine, not quite the scum of high and villainy, but
I just want to acknowledge how much I'm not complaining at all. I think stylistically it's great, but I want to acknowledge how much they went out of their way to make Mando slowly going through the town on his speeder look like him going through town on a horse. I mean, this is the most quintessential spaghetti western that the Mandalorian has ever gotten.
True.
And back to its roots, and heck, the episode even kind of Marshall and everything.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of which, the Marshal.
Before we get to the Marshal, I just have to ask because he looked really familiar and I couldn't place him. Does anyone know who plays the bartender? If that was anyone that we would know.
I don't know the actor. I know, his race is supposed to be. He's the same race as Hondo. He's Queequeg.
Okay. Got it. That's cool. Oh, by the way, oh my god, dude! If we see Hondo in the season,
I'm just saying we saw a member of Hondo's race, so it's
just
not
literally just forget it. If Hondo Anaka pops up in live action, I will just die of happiness.
Me too. Again, it's possible. Hondo's been around. He absolutely could
show up. This is just speaking from my fandom of Hondo from Smuggler's Run. I have no other context for Hondo other than that ride, but I
keep telling you, watch those Clone Wars episodes, man.
I know.
He was in Rebels too.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Yeah, there's a whole thing with Hondo. He's great.
Of course, we know we're getting Ahsoka, but Hondo would be a great left turn too. And plus, it'd be a great tie-in to be like, hey, if you liked Hondo and Naka, go see him in Galaxy's Edge.
Possible.
Oh, good. It looks like I have to. Unfortunately, I have to go for and go.
Oh, you have to go right now? Okay, Jacob. Sorry about that, but any final thoughts, really quick, before you leave?
Very fun episode. I really enjoyed it. It was nice to see a return, and holy crap, it's Boba Fett.
Okay. All right, thanks for joining us, Jacob. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
All right. Okay. Right. So, okay. So, also, Dragon, I'm going to throw out there, of course, you and I did our Christmas holiday special pitch for Mandalorian in Christmas in July. I think we did a damn good job, man. I'm still proud of that pitch.
Proud of your pitch.
I really like Kevin Smith as the the Star Tours passenger with the over the top reactions. All right. Anyways, but seriously, man, I am just waiting for some piece of Star Wars media to use Galaxy's Edge as a straight up set, because if you've been there in person, Dragon, it feels like a set. Anyways, all right. So, let's get into Timothy Oliphant,
or as Kevin Smith calls him, Olifantastic.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Bear in mind, it's kind of how he makes fun of him, but sure. Okay, so
So Timothy Oliphant Dragon, the thing that I know him the most from, I know he's like really famous for Deadwood, but I know him from Santa Clarita, and yeah, I never even finished Santa Clarita, so I don't know how much more deep his character gets, but I basically know him as kind of like a, a kind of like a. I don't even know how you would describe his performance in Santa Clarita, but I know that it's not how he usually is. I know in Santa Clarita is kind of playing against type.
yeah, exactly. He's very high strung. He's very
Right,
pedantic.
right.
He's just trying to keep his family and his wife safe from the crazy. Basically, he's a man on the brink of madness, just trying to deal with that giant, kind of that giant smile on his face, is like waiting to go crazy. There is another role you should know about with Timothy Olyphant.
Okay.
They're basically doing here with this, which is really clever. So one of the other shows that people love Timothy Olyphant in is a show called Justified.
Right.
Now,
Another show I've heard a lot about. Yeah.
in Justified, he plays a marshal.
Oh, okay.
So you
Okay.
see, so
All right. So of course we get that great reveal where it's like, we're waiting like, oh God, okay, who's going to be the Mandalorian in this town? And then of course we see Boba Fett's armor. We're like, wait a minute, that's not like we know right away. That's not Boba Fett.
yeah, like this is all wrong. Like the inner fanboy in you is like, wait. This is
Right.
the whole premise of the Mandalorian is that we're taking the visage of Boba Fett and we're making it deep. We're actually adding layers to it and stuff, and adding characterization. And point being, we know what this guy looks like, and we've got our own guy. But this guy, like this is only like the helmet and the chest plate in the back. He's missing all the other stuff.
Of course, that is the joke, and
Yep.
it's a great joke.
Yeah, this guy's a fan favorite. He's actually from some of the expanded universe stuff. I believe the
Yes,
old
yes,
stuff.
I am very much aware of this. Yeah. Um. This guy is actually he's one of the few things from the expanded universe that they bothered to take over. The expanded universe they left a lot of things in the dust. Hello, Mara Jade. How you doing? But but yeah, I'm glad to see that this guy kind of like made the transition from expanded universe canon to Disney Star Wars canon.
I don't know how close. I didn't look into it. I don't know how closely they followed it, but I don't know if they did or not. But regardless, I really love this version
Um,
of the character. I love this Cobb Vanth that we get here in the show.
for the most part, characterization wise, it's pretty on point. The only difference is that he was the sheriff of Tatooine.
Well, I mean, again, come on, same difference. I mean, he's on Tatooine as a sheriff. He's a marshal. I mean, come
I
on.
know. I'm just saying there was a distinction where he was the sheriff of like the whole planet, and he was maybe a little power hungry in that regard.
Well, good news. That's closer than I thought I was
Uh-huh.
thinking. So that point being, it's relatively close. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
But yeah, so of course, kind of the space version of his character in Justified. Of course, I love the moment that I crystallized this is going to work for me. It's like, okay, this is like, because initially I'm looking at like, okay, he's not just in the full Boba Fett ensemble, but still, I mean, I'll take it. I'm not again. It's a quibble, but it's perfectly fine because the whole episode's about this. Okay?
Dragon, I have a feeling that this whole season is going to be all about slowly like we know that Boba Fett's in there. But this season's going to be all about slowly building up the grand reveal of the fully armored Boba Fett.
Sure. So I love just the helmet bit where like he sits down, he has the swagger, and like the first thing he does when he sits down, he takes off the helmet, just shows you, okay, kids, he ain't a Mandalorian. If you learn anything from Mandalorian. And of course, you got to remember, technically, Boba Fett is not a Mandalorian. I don't think Django is either. That's the whole thing with that too. So they're not. They're just using the Mandalorian arm, which again is going to have them button heads, I'm sure, later on, but we'll get there. So that's what I'm saying. It's the whole like the mid. Like he sits down for a drink, not blue milk, but blue. It's like kind of the blue sarsaparilla of space, as it were.
Oh God,
Spokesca. I think it's called Spokesca.
Uh-huh.
So it's basically the other thing they serve at Oga's Cantina, roughly, right? It's like you have like the one's the milk and one's the other one, right?
Well, in regards to just the milk, I mean, they serve a lot of other stuff in Oga's Cantina that I don't want to bore you
Well,
with.
my point is they have like another blue beverage, one's alcoholic, isn't it?
Yes, and the alcoholic one is basically like a slushy version of the blue milk.
But it's blue though, right?
Wait, no, I'm sorry. The basically what you can get at the milk stand is the slushy version, And then what you can get in Oga's Cantina is kind of like the syrupy, like quote unquote milk version, but it doesn't really have the consistency of milk. And yes, Dragon, to quote Tuco Salamaka, it's blue.
Right.
My ex-girlfriend and I used to quote that all the time. Look, it's blue.
Anyway, but yeah, there's the little. I just love that scene so much where these two guys. Where again, he has Olafine has so much like Western charm. It's ridiculous in this scene. Really, he's been all friendly and cordial with Mandalorian, talking about, "Oh, I heard about your little adventure with this guy, and I got a good feeling about you." And of course, like and I love that Mando isn't back and now like take the armor off. Or again, of course, a big thing. One, I mean, he doesn't even know the full story about this, about the Boba Fett thing. I don't even know if he does. If we're all know, the point being, he's just seeing the helmet, like, okay, this guy, he ain't a Mandalorian.
We really don't know how much the actual Mandalorians know about Boba Fett.
Yeah, it is definitely a question. I know they're a little familiar with Jango way back during Clone Wars, but I don't know how. Basically, there's like a guy who they confirmed he wasn't a Mandalorian way back in Clone Wars. That's all they really talked about him in that regard. But again, that was ages ago, and there's a lot we're not sure of with this whole status quo of the 5 years after Jedi. So anyway, the point being, just a really great kind of exchange there, and also just talk about the backstory. So the point being, I want to be clear. I didn't mean to quibble about the whole he's not in the full outfit, because again, I agree with you. I think we are building towards being in the full outfit, possibly.
I think that's going to be the finale, Dragon. I'm convinced of that.
Either this season or next. Remember, they have been approved for a season 3, so it could possibly be.
No. I think season 3 is going to be all Boba Fett in the armor. Sure. I think that's what this season is going to build up towards.
But again, just I do love the idea of like the pieced together armor that was recovered in the way it was recovered. Though I do love how I love the idea he traded. He traded something with Jawas. He traded this Camtono, Camtono, the ice cream maker.
Yes.
Of these crystals, these silcax crystals or something. Silicax crystals. Anyway, the point being, traded him for was wandering the desert after running from the bandits for the Boba Fett's armor, which makes sense. Like, yeah, Sarlacc Pit's probably going to shoot out. I don't know if he curled out with the armor on and he lost it, or vice versa. The point being, it makes sense. Eventually, it would wash up, and the Jawas would get it. That's perfect. I love that idea. And that's how you get the guy wearing the Boba Fett. And of course, not only that, we have these great subtle, awesome nods to Boba Fett in this episode. The best one, the rocket launcher, Tiki. You know the story of the rocket launcher. Yeah. And they love referencing the toys and everything. We have the rocket launcher. And
Dragon, what I love about the rocket launcher is they pretty much like redeem the whole like Boba Fett.
That's what I'm saying. No, I'm saying like literally it's two things. It's like one, you have like I'm saying he shoots the rocket launcher. So he shoots the rocket just like the toy that was infamously made that couldn't. They had the toy was unsafe because he can't shoot a rocket because kids are going to swallow it.
Right.
So they glued it shut. But yeah, then I love that we redeemed the most later on though with the rocket part of it. We've redeemed the most embarrassing defeat of Boba Fett in Star Wars with this really awesome sacrificial bit, which is a really great bit for our Mando. Which is that's all I love it because it goes the same way. It's like, oh guys, he's flying all over the place.
Right.
That was like, wow. So the point being, all these little nods to Boba Fett without having the actual Boba Fett through the majority of the episode, that was fantastic. Let's see. So, point being, the big task at hand for this episode is the Krayt Dragon.
Yes.
Now, you know what the Krayt Dragon is, right?
You know what? This is actually the first time I've seen it.
Well, I think we've never seen it on the Krayt Dragon on screen necessarily, but I'm saying we've seen the skeleton. In Tatooine, you have like the giant skeletons in the desert.
Oh,
that's the one.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
So that's what it is.
I have another cool piece of trivia about the dragon. You ready for it?
What do you got?
Okay, so in A New Hope, you remember when Luke's being attacked by the Sand People and Obi-Wan Kenobi uses that siren call to scare them away?
Yeah.
Dragon, get this. That siren call, I'm not sure which edition of the original trilogy it is, because keep in mind, the original trilogy, they change shit like this up all the time.
Yeah, I'm well aware.
But one of the editions, I think it's the original Star Wars Special Edition, I want to say. So the first time that George went in and muckety mucked with it. Dragon, I'm pretty sure it's like the exact same siren sound effect that this thing utters that Obi-Wan copies.
Oh, oh my God, and that's why they're scared of it. Oh,
Yep.
My God, that's
Isn't
awesome.
that cool?
Yes, you're blowing my mind here. Yeah.
So it's like the writers really did their homework with that.
This is why I love this show.
Right.
Because they get everything so much. You put all the elbow grease into this, man. It's awesome. Anyway, so
I mean, like I said, if George didn't tinker with sound effects in the special edition so much, it'd be like even more recognizable. But still, it's there.
So the Krayt Dragon, basically the living Krayt Dragon, which apparently a few of them survive. And rarely do they come out of Tatooine, I'd imagine, because when they do, eventually they're going to die off. And they're going to be all giant skeletons in the desert that the sand people are going to kind of like carve out for parts and stuff. So a lot of people brought up there's actually kind of a symbolic, kind of quasi-political element to this, Tiki. And
Is there?
I don't think what
Is there?
Yeah. It's that people. It's kind of an interesting point where they pointed out the whole play of the episode is getting the Sand People and the town to work together. And the Mando has this great piece of advice that this is where people have been globbing onto like kind of positive political message here is that if we fight amongst each other, the monster will kill us.
Right,
kind of a metaphor for 2020 in a sense. It's like, guys.
Oh dear. Oh god.
In a sense, I mean, I can kind of get that's a positive message. Like, you know what, guys, we got to work together here. Let's not.
I don't even want to think about what's going to go down in a couple days. Not to date this podcast, but
I'm just
anyways,
saying as a whole with the years, like a lot of chaos and stuff.
Sure.
Let's not let this monster, this Krayt Dragon, get us all.
The Krayt Dragon is 2020. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, a lot of people making some Dune parallels, but I think, come on.
You know what's funny, Dragon? You know the thing that I thought of?
What?
This is going to be really super silly, but I kind of thought of the giant worm from SpongeBob.
I take it, I mean, instinctually, maybe we all do, but I could table outside. I mean, we're all thinking of of Wormy. Come on.
Right. So yeah. Dragon, when you first saw this thing, like, going through the sand, I felt stupid, but I actually thought it was a Sarlacc out of its pit.
No, but you remember the bit, though, with the Sarlacc.
Well, yeah, I remember the bit, and that kind of softened the blow that it wasn't a Sarlacc, because at first I was like, oh my god, we're gonna see a Sarlacc out of the pit, holy shit. But, no, it was even better. I just love the whole, like, there's no abandoned Sarlacc pits, not unless you ate the Sarlacc that was in there.
God, that's such a great build up. We have so many great builds, like the whole scale. That can't possibly be the scale. Oh, it's the scale.
And of course, Sarlacc calls to mind Boba Fett for sure.
That's the thing. Initially, my initial thought was that perhaps the giant rumbling was going to spit up Boba Fett or something, which you kind of.
Oh dear God! Oh man!
When you really think about, I know that's initially what I thought. If you really think about it, wouldn't make much sense because the armor got up there. The point being,
right.
Regardless, I just love the idea that then with like, oh my god, it's not the Sarlacc, it's a Krayt Dragon. What? It's
all right. So then that leads to kind of like the most formulaic part of this episode, but it's not a bad kind of formulaic where it's like, all right, we need to set aside our differences for the greater good of the town. The town people have to come together to fight this thing, like you said, the 2020 analogy.
Yep. And then basically we have this again. I live for this Mando's big hero moment at the end of this episode. This is like, oh my god, and he's using the rocket pack from the end of last season. Second time he's used it, which is, oh my god, we're using the rocket pack. It's awesome. And we have practical banthas.
Yes.
How awesome is that practical banthas? We haven't seen these in ages.
Dragon, we came close to having a whole bantha people mover system in Galaxy's Edge. I'll remind you.
Nuts, just nuts. So anyway, of course, remember for kids, there's a piece of Mandalorian in Galaxy's Edge.
Oh yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so but it has this great moment. It's almost like they use kind of a cheap analogy, but it's a one close to my heart. It's kind of like, take care of Andy for me moment. Mando, of course, realizing, okay, our big plan didn't work, so I'm going to go for the suicide plan. So, hey, take care of the child. And then he does the Boba Fett now, where he breaks his rocket pack, so he goes off to make sure he's going to be able to do that. Mando just he grabs the bantha, he gets swallowed. It's like the whole Jonah and the whale. It's kind of an Iron Man nod, if you will, to Avengers. He goes inside.
Yeah.
Takes it out and awesome. Oh my goodness, just wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And also we should mention they struck a deal where, again, I love this end idea too, where Mando, instead of doing a little shootout here, because Mando, don't kill this guy, seems really interesting. He's befriended Cobb Vanth, which is a really fascinating idea. He's befriended the false Mandalorian, which culturally should never work, but he really likes the guy.
Sure. And I mean, I'm convinced that we're going to see Vance again. I have a feeling that this is just kind of speculation here, but I have a feeling that it's going to be kind of similar to the way that season 1 was structured, where we go and we meet some of these important characters, the Grief Kargas, the Cara Dunes, the IG-11s, and then we kind of have Mando go on his journey, and then I think some of these characters are going to wrap back around to be in the final couple episodes.
Sure. So speaking of which, the big thing to speculate on, the really big thing to talk about, we got a shot of as Mando gets a new pal, the audience gets a new pal. Tamar Morrison. We see all we know is we see Tamar Morrison as a really scarred up looking guy with some very Mandalorian looking weapons on his back. And presumably a Boba Fett who's been through heck after all these years. Presumably.
Can you imagine if this turned out to be Captain Rex?
It is possible. That's what I'm saying. It is possible, but I think smart money's on me. We saw the armor come out. Presumably,
I'm just saying it'd be such a. Because honestly, I like Captain Rex a lot. So for me, I think it would be a cool misdirect. I know the internet as a whole would go insane if it wasn't Boba Fett.
I mean, honestly, part of me wonders why not both. I say, why not kind of do it? But that's just kind of me. But regardless, though, it's but I mean, I'm just saying with the whole we set up the armor. That's a great tease, and the whole hey, it's kind of it's not Boba Fett, but again, we're playing with the unplayed with toys. The leftover, we're playing with the parts from the Boba Fett versus the Boba Fett.
Exactly.
But you know what? It's like rewarding the audience for its faith and hey, and here's the thing. I want to be clear. So your theory again, Tiki, is fantastic. The whole it'd be great to have Boba Fett come back this season, but again, let's just play the odds. If we just had this, and then
don't even. My poor little heart can't take it, Dragon.
I'm saying with the promise that we are going to have a whole season full of Boba Fett with season 3. I mean, would it be this tease be enough to say shit? Given what we had last season, we saw Boba Fett's feet last season.
I'm sorry, buddy. I'm not even that big of a Boba Fett fan, but if this was the only thing we got out of him this season, then that would be really disappointing.
Well, I mean, look, I want to be clear. I am hoping for more Boba Fett. I just want to get that in there too. I'm hoping for kind of what you're pitching. I hope there's a journey for him to reclaim the armor, which means he's going to be tailing the Mando. That's what I'm hoping for. And at the very least, if that's the case, at some point you got to imagine he's going to have some words with Cobb Vanth. So you imagine Cobb Vanth's got to come back Boba. You're going to have the actual Boba Fett versus Cobb Vanth, probably leading to Boba Fett, leading to the Mandalorian and such. I don't know. At the very least, wouldn't it be great if we had almost like Zurg popping up in Toy Story 2, just when you thought he was you forgot about him long enough. And there he is, in the midst, oh god, Mando's running from, he's either running from or heading to Moff Gideon, and then who pops up? Not Gideon, Boba Fett.
All right. One other thing I want to kind of highlight, Dragon. I know it's not very chronological, but can we just linger just a little bit more on how cool the Sand People culture is?
You know me, Tiki. We got everything we wanted here. We got Jawas and Sand People.
I honestly think the Sand, as much as I love that Jawa episode, I think emphasizing the cultural heritage of the Sand People was such a fucking cool move.
Yeah.
Because up until this point, the Sand People were probably the most savage creatures in the Star Wars universe, just because, every time we see them, they're just throwing a fit and trying to fuck up a pod race or trying to ruin Luke's day. And now it's like we get so much more context for their for their existence, for their plight. And I just, man, that is easily to me the best thing about this show. The best thing about this show isn't the Baby Yoda of it all, or the promise of Boba Fett, or the story. Simply the best thing about this show for me is that, again, it comes back to the action figure analogy. It's like spicing up some of the really iconic parts of Star Wars that don't necessarily have a lot of backstory behind them.
Yeah.
All right. So, final thoughts. I think this was a fantastic premiere. I'm not gonna lie, if the next episode is kind of like another episode in this vein where it's like, okay, he gets some sort of a clue to find a Mandalorian, but it turns out it's not a Mandalorian, and then he has to save somebody. Little side adventure. Dragon, that will get old if that's all we keep doing, but I have faith in the show that they know what they're doing. I honestly do have faith that this season is going to be more serialized than the last season was. I'm hoping that this episode, as great as this episode is, was maybe a little bit of a transitioning point in terms of kind of like, now that we have Boba Fett in the mix, now we can kind of start thinking in terms of like the broader implications of the narrative. So with that in mind, I mean, I really do think it's like this episode and the Jawa episode from season 2 or from season 1 are like neck and neck as my favorite episodes. Like I said, I think I would probably give the edge to the Jawa episode just because that's just like the full Samurai Jack experience. It's like, literally just like practically no dialogue, just Mando on his own. But still, this is a fantastic episode as well. Just all kinds of lore, all kinds of teases, but wrapped up into a really satisfying standalone story.
Yep. Final thoughts for me again. I mean, let's be honest. Bases were loaded with Mando having a good premiere. Let's not act too shocked about that. But I mean, it's nice when it happens good. Am I right? It's nice when we're off to the races. I think we're all feeling Mando fever in dire times, which is something we definitely need. Again, I think
This year, I keep saying it, but this year I've got Mando, I've got Soul, and I've got Mank. Those are the 3 things that are keeping me going this year, Dragon, in terms of my entertainment.
Yep. So, I mean, Oliphant, I think he delivered with this whole Cobb Vanth thing. I'm just so surprised we got all this out of the gate, and I was like, oh my god, it's such a delightful surprise, this premiere, and hopefully the surprises keep on coming.
All right. Well, that'll do it for us this week as we holster our remotes till the next installment calls for the draw. Mano y mano. Just Plus and Us.
This is the way.
Mando.
Mando.
Lando.
Mando.